Okay, it's me again. I would like to request us now to settle down as we'd like to start. And as we settle down, thank you all for making time to attend this launch of the report. There's lots to unpack, and I'd like to thank each one of you who from the industry took time to respond to this survey. Before we start, I would like to welcome Hans Christian Fleischer, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Farmforce, to open the morning for us. For those of us who are joining us online, we'd like to welcome you as well as we release the results of the Traceability Barometer. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. Well, 2-3 years ago, we did a traceability barometer. Since then, we have done a lot more on traceability, working in LATAM, Africa, and Asia. And we thought it's time to repeat that and see if we could compare some results and take this forward. So I'm just going to say welcome. Thank you for coming. We have put quite a lot into this. We started last year. Lots of respondents, good feedback, and look forward to present the results today. You will get a glimpse, and then there is a full report that you can get later. So with that, I'm going to give the word to Rodney, and he will take you through the session together with the rest of the panel. Thanks a lot.
Okay, great. So I will just take us through the structure of today's discussion. I will be presenting the results of the barometer through a couple of slides. After that, we will open up the discussion to a panel. And in the panel today, we have, unfortunately, we are missing a lady, as you can see. It's a sad affair. But I'm happy that amongst our audience, we've got plenty. So, and we know what important part we all play in the value chain. I'm looking forward to receiving feedback as we open the panel to Alejandro Hilaguirre, who is the Purchasing and Agricultural Development Director at Compañía Nacional de Chocolates, which is a national chocolate company of Colombia, and the brand behind Cordillera. So if you saw the beautifully branded chocolates on Monday, which disappeared in a matter of minutes, they are the brand behind this. We'll get to hear from Rafael. Rafael is an old boy in the block with many years of experience in the industry, working in different places. I've seen the team from Cameroon here. Rafael spent quite some time setting up Cameroon, is that right? And before he went into full-time consulting, he was the managing director for cocoa and cocoa sourcing for Barry Callebaut. So he will be here to give his thoughts. He now supports many others, including some of you who are here from the brands and the processors and traders to source better cocoa for better chocolate. We'll also have Thomas Vassen, who is very well known to you, otherwise known as the EUDR man. He is the founder and CEO of Meridia, who we have partnered with for this traceability barometer. They run their verification methodology that was validated by KPMG and has emerged as one of the top solutions to support EUDR compliance. And hence, we are working with them. They are a partner of Farmforce, both on this traceability barometer and as we support our customers with compliance. So we'll open up to a panel, and then I know most of you will have questions, if not all. So we'll also have enough time for questions and thoughts as to how the industry is moving. Does that sound like a good plan? Before we start, I'd like to know who is in the room, okay? So the Traceability Barometer covered up to 80 different entities cutting across the value chain. We have producers and cooperatives who responded to the survey. It was a multi-language survey run this time by Nielsen IQ. So the reason Farmforce did this is to build our reputation and as our position in the industry continues to grow. We do find ourselves at a unique position. We are supporting cooperatives, we're supporting traders, we're supporting processors, we're supporting global brands in sourcing more sustainable cocoa, and when we're not talking about cocoa, coffee, and other commodities. And so we saw that it would be fair to invest in this barometer to give a pulse check on how the industry is moving towards traceability. And so as we start, about 80 organizations responded to the survey, from the smallest cooperatives in Africa to the largest global traders and brands. Maybe just about less than 500 people, individual people. The methodology is that it was an anonymized survey, so we do not know who responded to the survey, but we know what part of the supply chain they sit. And that's why I can tell you about 47% of the producers, of about 52% of the producers who responded to the survey were from West Africa. So we have a large user base in West Africa. 52% of those were from West Africa. We do work in Latin America, and as Hans Christian mentioned, in Asia, but the larger extent is in this part of the region. The results reveal a notable tension, which we call the cocoa visibility paradox. We have never had more data, nor have we ever invested in data. Like the last 3 years, everybody's talking about which solution are you using, which technology have you heard of. But the thing is, even with the investment rising, we see some interesting trends. And so I'll walk you through the reality of the first mile, where Farmforce works. So we find a sector in acceleration. So who are we talking about? The report, in this case, focuses at the heart of the cocoa world. And as I said, 52% of the producers that we surveyed are based in West and Central Africa. These are predominantly small operators. Nearly half handle less than 1,000 tons annually. But we also see a polarized market, whereas in 2023, when we ran the last survey, there was about 15 to 25% who claimed they had visibility on their sourcing operations. In just a span of 2.5 years, there was a triple jump to close to 80%, who now claimed to have visibility over their operations. So what do we see from here? That the high-level farm visibility has tripled. There's a claim towards visibility, but we see the push being compliance, which we very well know. Compliance is a driver of change. And for most respondents, they claim that they're registering farmers, they're mapping the farms as a result of the compliance initiatives. Who's pushing the initiative? Can anybody take a guess? And then the traders. Okay? Thank you, Spencer. So what's happening is that the EUDR is forcing a binary outcome. You either have full compliance, or farmers, cooperatives, producers, or even export countries who are facing market exclusion. And while they traditionally traded with the higher value markets, even if they have high quality cocoa, they cannot access them, forced to go to alternative markets, Asia, parts of Northern America, but not getting value for the investment that they put in. I'll go to the next slide. And so here we have the paradox. On the surface, the industry looks ready because 77% are claiming that they have full visibility on their sourcing operations. 59% of the 77% producers with unique IDs, so we know the farmers more, because each farmer that you have within the supply chain now supposedly has a unique farmer ID. So we know the farmer, but then again, we don't know where the farms are. And this is the challenge. And so while the respondents claim that they know where, or they claim to know where their cocoa comes from, they have no idea, or they cannot verify where it's coming from. So a farmer has 1 or 2 plots. Do you have the right geolocation? Do you have the right polygon? And so this is where the biggest challenge is, or the next step, if you'd like to look at it that way. So we had producers who claimed they had 0 or fewer than 25% of their farms mapped. And so where is all this investment going? It's probably going in just collecting the farmer identification data, which, if it's a compliance initiative, doesn't make much sense to invest in, right? And so we know the farmer, but unfortunately, lost the farm. And so just sticking on this slide just a bit more, there's a question about the quality of the data that's coming in from the field. We have interacted with customers who spend quite a lot on getting this data. We have heard our customers, partners, before working with us, claiming they spent even close to 50, 60 euros a farmer or a polygon, depending on where you're working, to get this data. But then again, the interesting thing is that 28% of the producers, have mapped 0% of their farms with a geotag, okay? Which means that you might have this, but it's not giving you the data. As we move on, the digital paper ceiling and the digital dividend. 45% of the producers still rely on papers or spreadsheets, which is a consequence is that we're unable to verify, among other sustainability claims, the deforestation status. We're seeing a push towards deforestation and deforestation claims or claims of the land use change. And so we're unable to verify. And 77% of the farmers who are fully digitized are happy because they're compliant. And so you cannot run a satellite deforestation check on a paper ledger. And so where does this bring us? It brings us to where the bottleneck is. 52% of the producers are collecting data, but struggle to integrate it into daily operations. We've run through the numbers of the investment that most of us are making into the supply chain. But in addition to having this data, it should be helping the farmers earn a better income, right? Produce better results. But they're struggling to use that on their daily operation. Challenges are sometimes through the access. Farmers or producers may not have access to this data, or they do not get the timely support that they do require for accurate interventions. So collecting the polygon is only half the battle, but using it to their advantage is another. And so how does this look like between 2023 and now? The focus on 2023 was access to data. Nobody had data. They were claiming the supply chain was too complex, and so we can't get it. In 2026, the focus is on the cost and resources and the funding. And in the midst of cost-cutting measures, as we all know, it's becoming even more and more challenging. And that's where we see the binary exclusion, where we have farmers who are fully compliant and the ones who are completely excluded for some markets, which is, again, rising the gap in payments to farmers. So beyond compliance. So what's the trend we're drawing from all the data? And this will be my last slide. What we're seeing is that we're seeing the global brands, we're seeing the traders, we're seeing the processors, we're seeing the cooperatives having improved to a large extent their data collection over the last 3 years. We're finding more and more traceable cocoa. We had separate supply chains between certified and conventional supply chains. And now we're moving towards a more equalized supply chain where producers have their data and it's traveling through the supply chain. And then the farming projects, the regenerative agricultural farming projects are now becoming more, or there's a more focus on these regen ag projects. And rightly so, as we've seen, even during the speeches and the discussions this week, there's a push behind regen ag, agroforestry, biodiversity, so that we can use this data to get the return on investment and make sure the farmers actually get their bang for buck. And so I'm going to leave this here and ask my panel to join me as we discuss what really are the next steps. There's a QR code on your screen if you'd like to download the full report. This was focused on cocoa, but as I said, we surveyed multiple supply chains, cocoa, coffee being the largest among the respondents. We'll hear some more of the results from my panel, And I'd like to invite Alejandro, Rafael, and Tomas to have a seat. So next we'll have Tomas for the next 5 minutes. Full disclosure, they all had a snapshot of the report to prepare for their thoughts from each of the different positions that they sit in the supply chain. And so Tomas, 5 minutes starts now.
Cool. Full disclosure, also had a couple of long nights. But it's been good. So I have a couple of things I want to tease out of the results, and it was indeed quite interesting for us to also get a couple of hunches corroborated with the data. I think building on what Rodney has said, a few years ago, there's this hunger for data. Like, we need visibility. What is really going on in the fields? And we need to sort of really accelerate a mapping. It was all about that. What I'm seeing now is that there's this sense there is more and more data, but it's still a sense of a bit of, a quicksand feeling. And the further down you sit on the supply chain, the more there's this sense like, well, we have a lot of data, but then, does it all make sense? We have various sources of truth, different versions of data. And that's both in the sense of data being aggregated from your various suppliers, as well as actually we have all kinds of versions on where's the deforestation. And there's more and more comparative studies that show that discrepancy. And that's kind of the frustration sort of that we are in some sense, of I would say a sort of creative tension to see, okay, what's next? And of course, the battleground is in the direct supply chain. I think we need to be very clear that it's a very different picture. In your direct supply chain, there's control, there's engagement with farmers, there's a long-standing relationships, there's visibility, there is not a sense of quicksand. There's a sort of, okay, we have a good sort of ground. The indirect supply chain, this is, I think, where we see all the struggle, all the challenge. And this is where it's not just a matter of a technical innovation. It's really about some kind of a social transformation. If you're closer to the farm, it's always about like, but it's all good and well, this EODR stuff, but it comes at a premium. Where's the money to do this well, right? And this is the shout out to our friends at the EU. The worst thing you can have is uncertainty, because I think us in a room, we're still pretty certain that this EODR will come, but if you talk to anyone in Origin, they're very disillusioned about it. And so how do you get to convince these people to actually keep that investment going if there's this continuous sense of uncertainty? So that's, I think, where we are. So what is needed there is the business case. And I think this is where it becomes interesting in trying to build something where, yes, we need a baseline for EODR. The first question, how can we create more of a single source of truth? And in this sense, I think some of the interesting practices we're seeing is two things. First of all, a more active engagement in origin. So this is what we're trying to also move from identification of risk to a much more proactive support in mitigation of risk. I think many origin suppliers are underestimating that is still the majority of the work. Not seeing that there's a farm with an illegal status or deforested land or, incorrect measurements. But then how to mitigate, how to actually resolve that. That's where there needs to be more active support. And that takes time. So we need to educate that this takes sometimes 6 months, and you need to start today. The other aspect that's quite promising, I feel, is more a collaboration with local authorities and institutions on building more national scale programs. And in this sense, I would advocate for programs that I think are more being pioneered in the coffee sector. Usually cocoa is a bit further ahead. Actually on this, I see more developments in coffee in countries like Uganda or Vietnam, where there's a collaboration with private sector, local cooperatives and the government to come together to map out things on a countrywide level And then you're not talking about $50 a plot, then you're talking about $3 to $4 a plot. And an ongoing system that maintains and sanitizes that data and makes it available for everyone. So that not only some farmers get mapped 10 times a year and they get complete fatigue and others are never mapped at all. So it's much more of a spread out effort. And so that's still a bit of a challenge if this is more of a black box that the government operates and nobody knows what's going on. Not calling out any names. But I think we can learn from coffee in this way. And I think there is an opportunity to make this still more pre-competitive. If we do that as a baseline, then as a company, you can then go over and above. You can then say, yes, we can move our land use change emissions assessment from national statistics or jurisdictions to actual direct land use change emissions, using the farm plots we have to actually improve our baselines. And then we can build on top of it with this kind of regenerative agriculture, which to me was one of the most interesting findings, that actually a vast majority of respondents are investing into this. It's becoming the new normal. And so this is where accurate data becomes an asset. We've always been talking about it for a whole decade, accurate data as an asset. It starts to really show in these kinds of endeavors. And I think that's one of the key findings. And of course, how do we scale that up? Yeah, you need this to become data-driven. So I would say, to sort of conclude, we need to build a pre-competitive baseline, but it does not preclude companies from still pioneer and expanding on that data and build a competitive advantage in their particular supply chain. And which is, of course, we are in a competitive marketplace. We shouldn't say that we're not. But there's room for both. And so with that, I think there's a couple of takeaways. I think that whether you are, just like our friend here, very close to the farmers, working every day to see how do I expand the percentage of verified farmers in a way that makes sense to us as a business, right? And how do I do that in collaboration with my clients to cost share? At the same time, you're further down, we're talking to large brands that get data from everyone. And I've seen these data sets, when you put them together, there are certain places in the country where there's easily 5 or 6 farms claiming the same land, different farmer names. How do I make sense of this? Then you get to see how messy and how inaccurate and how problematic it is, which is, I refer to this quicksand situation. And again, that's why you can sort of drive that kind of single source of truth through collaborative platforms and approaches. So yeah, I hope that's a way that we see in the next year's assessment again, a move towards that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Thomas. Alejandro, you're closer to the farmers, you work with farmers, you've been on the phone frantically the whole week trying to sort them out. How do you unpack the results?
Hi everyone, it's Alejandro from Colombia. And even though we are working close to the farmers, and we have been doing this for almost 7 decades, it's still extremely challenging. The cocoa sector is complicated, both from the natural point of view, like we have seen everything about the tree, the yields, but also from the social point of view, and it's the same in Colombia. So I'm in charge of the procurement process. I buy the physical beans, but I also lead all the sustainability programs. And the company has been working with farmers, as I mentioned, since 1958. However, even though this closeness with the farmer, the logistics are so complicated that traceability for us is very expensive. And I'll give you an idea. In Colombia, we have like 32 departments, and out of those, we have cocoa in 30 of them. And the area is not that big. We have less than 200,000 hectares, and we produce 70,000 tons a year. However, the logistics in terms of where the farmers are and the production of the cocoa makes traceability so complicated, because on average, one household that grows cocoa is producing 1 ton a year. So if we are buying, that's the real number, half of the Colombian harvest, which is 35,000 tons a year, behind we have like 35,000 farmers, widely spread all over the country. And with cocoa, you don't have like 2 harvests a year. You're usually, because we have a lot of pests and diseases, and one of the recommendation is you gotta harvest every other week. So on average, you're gonna have farmers harvesting cocoa, their farms, 25 times a year. And each harvest is close to a bag, less than a bag, 40 kgs. And for us, we have valid farmers, and that's another tricky thing for traceability. We have invalid farmers, not because they did deforest, but we have seen like alarms, false alarms, because they trimmed the timber trees or because they just chopped down their banana plantations. We work with agroforestry systems, so everything you do with a shade tree, with a timber tree, just to like promote the cocoa cultivation, could give you an alarm. So even if we have like valid farmers, we do have invalid farmers that we have to validate. But our aggregators, the associations we're buying bean from, have to separate. So every other week they have to separate traceable beans from non-traceable bean, conventional beans, and we have to do the same along the chain. So it's very complicated. It's expensive.
On that note, one of the things that we got from the results of the report was that there's a risk of this, what you call invalid farmers, to be excluded. What's your take?
100% agree. And it is because, as I mentioned, the agroforestry system is so complicated that we have seen either when farmers are renovating their plantations, these alarms, or when farmers are trimming the shade trees. So it's very expensive first, like to take the polygon information because of this logistic, because of this wide distribution. By the way, cocoa farming is very convenient because of the low yields compared with other crops. A farmer in Colombia has the opportunity in the lowlands because the altitude in Colombia and in the tropics determine the temperature, and the temperature determines what crops you can grow. So we grow cocoa in the lowlands up to 1,200 meters. There you can grow avocado trees, then you can grow plantains or citrus. But these fruit crops, on average, you're gonna have like 15 tons per hectare. With cocoa, as I mentioned, is 400 kgs per hectare. With bad roads, very far from the towns, it's way easier in logistical terms to grow cocoa. You can storage the cocoa beans like for a couple of months. Yeah. You cannot do that with avocados and with citrus. So it's the context in general promotes the cocoa sector, but at the same time it's very complicated. And if we see an alarm, it's going to be very expensive to check if that's a false alarm or not.
Yeah. Yeah. So the risk of exclusion is quite high. Rafael, I'm turning to you because you also now sit at a midpoint where you sit with the brands, the processors, and also close to the farmers. And packing the results and given the challenges, what are your thoughts?
Thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Meridia, Farmforce. So we discussed about tech and collaboration together with Thomas. Ali, I think it was amazing also to know the reality on the ground and how it really translates. When I read the survey, I stopped on 3 batch of numbers, which I think stress 3 industry trends, and that would be my contribution today. The first one, actually a number which was not stated, but I wanted to compare cocoa versus other crops. You mentioned coffee is the second highest crop you survey. So we saw your first number was 77% visibility for cocoa. Yeah. For coffee, it stands way behind at 14%. And there is a sad reason for this, is that cocoa is probably one of the most archaic crop in the world, in the sense that farmers are often defined as stuck in low input, low output systems, most of them yielding less than 500 kilo per hectare, harvesting 2 to 4 hectares, so leading to your 1,000 average in Colombia, for example, meaning that many of them live in extreme poverty. which is it's less than $3 a day as defined by the World Bank, and that induces other issues, deforestation and child labor that many of you are very well aware here in the room. So these sustainability issues combine with the fact that the end product, chocolate, is a very emotional product consumed in much wealthier country in the global north, is a piece of joy at Christmas, Mother's Day, you just mentioned Valentine's Day, Christmas, Easter. The combination of this is very high scrutiny on cocoa and chocolate, and rightly so, by NGOs and by governments as well. And the backbone of that means a lot of, well, the backbone to work on sustainability is first my traceability, and many systems are in place in cocoa. Maybe they are not having enough impact because we've not made much progress on the issues I mentioned, but at least it's a fact that it's much more advanced than in coffee. And coffee actually is much more advanced agronomically, but it's much more behind in terms of traceability and sustainability overall. So that's my first comment. The second comment is a clear move from social to environmental sustainability. And we saw that with your second or third slide, where you had identity traceability laid out. I need to read, was 59% identity traceability, meaning knowing who is a farmer, but only half of those also offer, well, know where their cocoa comes from. And that comes down to the biggest issue, which was tackled and really started to be massively tackled by Nestlé back in 2013, is child labor with CLMRS, child labor monitoring and remediation system, which was started by Nestlé back in 2013. So a lot of work has been done here, and the willingness to care about the environment actually came much later. Obviously, it was massively accelerated by the EUDR and its adoption in 2022. And then we saw another number, which was your last and probably first Traceability Barometer in 2023, and there was a geographical mapping which was multiplied by 3 over the last 3 years. So it's clear UDR helped a lot improve the geographical traceability. So that was my second comment. And my third is indeed a clear move beyond compliance. And a key number there is that 45 of producers request polygon mapping for cocoa, while EUDR only requests a GPS point for plots below 4 hectares. So it's very interesting that farmers and obviously many of their off-takers who sponsor, who finance all these solutions upstream in the value chain, see the benefit of moving well beyond the EUDR requirement with polygon mapping. One of the advantages of polygon mapping is, for example, all the agroforestry efforts. One of the regen ag activities that is for sure trending, as we saw with your last number. If you prove that it's happening within your supply chain, you can then register lower emission factor. It can be SBTi compliance, and you can basically decrease your scope 3 emissions.
Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, Alejo, and thank you, Thomas. We've had a lot of numbers and feedback from the gentlemen who are sitting in front of you. But I'm sure some of you have questions relating to the data that you've seen, but also regarding some of the next steps and what we're seeing the industry moving. We've talked about regen agriculture. We've talked about the return on investment on these farms and farmers and producing areas and countries. And so I'd like to open the floor to perhaps 1 or 2 questions, as we have 20 minutes, so there's enough time for discussion. Great. I was going to give priority to the ladies. Okay. So, let's go.
Thank you, Rodney. I would like to ask, hi, I'm Elizabeth Goodwin from the NGO Swiss Contact. I'd like to ask the panel, the costs of mapping and the costs of traceability, how are they shared throughout the different levels of the supply chain?
You can decide who takes that as I take the second one.
Absolutely. I'll take this one because it's very expensive. It's very expensive given the logistics. In 2023, when we were just starting this journey, one of the things we said, okay, we need the polygons at the basic. Because, by the way, EUDR is not only about the polygons, it's also about legality. And in order to demonstrate legality, you have to track what is going on. And in order to demonstrate Regenac, you have to visit the farmer. So one important question, how much does it cost to visit a farmer? And it all depends. When you are in a cocoa town like San Vicente, Chucurí, which is the cocoa capital in the country, when you have cocoa, your neighbor has cocoa, and so on, it's way cheaper. But when you are in the Caquetá department, where cocoa has been promoted to substitute illicit crops, you are not going to see the same reality. You have to travel like 2 hours, like either in a horse or in a motorbike to visit one farmer, and then you have to do the same to visit the next farmer. So costs depends. And we were discussing earlier, is Ronnie says, hey, no, there are people who say that like taking info for one polygon costs around $2,000. And I say, yeah, we are those. It costs on average that. We are finding, yeah, $20. Yeah. At the end, the cost, no, $20, sorry. And the thing is that in order to promote, as I mentioned earlier, the segregation of valid and like conventional cocoa, we also have to pay an extra to incentivize either the aggregator and the farmer. So it's not only the cost of taking the info of those polygons, but also the cost of keep buying traceable cocoa.
I could just a very quick, just to provide a bit of context as well, other countries. So in West Africa, because it's been, certification has been a thing for the last decade or so, there has been a long-standing sort of arrangement, right? And mapping has taken place for a longer time. And we do see many of the larger traders and brands to cost share typically, and then a mapping of a point or polygon does cost a couple of euros or dollars at that kind of scale. And we do see programs often where there's a bit of a split between the international trader and then the downstream manufacturer on that. And then the data is sort of flowing through the supply chain that way. The other one, I think in Brazil, is interesting, where there's a rural cadastre already set up, nationally sanctioned, where there is actually the data available that you can draw from a national database. The trouble there is that it's the whole farm property there, and so many farmers produce multiple crops and have to have a legal reserve on plot, which is forest. And you often get a deforestation alert if you don't carve out the actual commodity crop. So there's more of a challenge there. So there are some differences globally that impact this.
I'm going to cut it there. As I take the next, Rafael, you have something to say, 30 seconds?
Yeah, it's too tempting to comment. Trying to complement and not repeat, right? I think there's a cost of polygons you mentioned, but there are many more costs downstream, right? So having a solution like Meridia or Farmforce, or Meridia more to, for example, check on deforestation in an additional cost. There are many one-off costs, right? Once you have implemented, it should be cheaper over time, and just the cost of running a software is obviously much less than having the people mapping one-on-one the farm. And then, because it's so costly, also many of the bigger players have decided to prefer not to segregate the EUDR compliant and non-EUDR compliant, doing for whole their supply chain, in order to then have the flexibility at least of mixing within the factory, and then not only worrying of what goes to the EU versus the rest of the world.
Thank you. Our second question.
Hi, yes, thank you. Ariana Carter from Ecom. I was curious on your methodology, the statistics or the percentages you were showing said of producers. So is this a subset of the total surveyed businesses that are just actually producing cocoa, or are those statistics like, so for example, you said 59% of producers don't have unique IDs. So I'm just trying to make sense of who is saying that.
Good, thank you for that question. I'll take it. Or Arno, do you want to take it? Yeah. Okay. So this is Arno. He's the one who led the Traceability Barometer project. And thank you so much, Arno, for the great work. So what's the methodology we approached it with? The 59% of the farmers, there are certain categories of actors in the supply chain, and they selected where they sit in the supply chain. And so out of the 100% who selected being as producers, 59% of those are the ones who claim this. Does that make sense? Okay, Arno, do you want to compliment? Go ahead. Follow-up question?
One thing is, when we speak about the producers here, we can understand both producers and corporates.
But I think the question was also whether this percentage applies particularly to cocoa or is across commodity.
To cocoa.
To cocoa.
This is cocoa related. Yeah. 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 Okay. Correct. Okay. Another question? Oh my god. Okay, so Thomas, I'm coming. Sophonias, I'm coming. And Jorge.
Yeah, thank you very much for the discussion. Lea Bozek from Preferred by Nature. I have some questions, like, do you have some data related to the ownership of the data? And maybe one question related to Alejandro. I'm curious about how do you work with farmers on data management? Like, who is owning the data? How are you working with farmers on that?
Short answer to your question, no. We don't have data regarding the ownership, as it was focused on the operations of the supply chain. And then the second question is for you, Ale.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to sign an agreement. We gotta let the farmer know we're gathering the data and the data belongs to him or to her. But that we're using that data to do analysis in terms of their polygons or the economic status. But yeah, there is in the agreement, the first thing we're doing is letting the farmer know that we are collecting the data and following all the habeas data regulation in the country. We work in Colombia.
Yes, thank you. I'm Thomas from Field Data Africa. So we do all which involves on the ground data collection, polygon mapping. And I wanted to jump back to an observation, a question that Thomas asked, which was how can we create a single source of truth, which I believe is the key element here also for cost optimization in traceability. Because what we observe is that traceability by operators is done in closed ecosystems. And so when we look at farmer organizations, sometimes they're supposed to map their farmers for each different customer that they have, because all these databases don't really interoperate. Each exporter keeps its data, his precious data for himself, and doesn't really share it, which also means that most of the players, the traceability data that they have is incomplete, because one farmer is in a database and is in the next, who will have delivered in the first database and then in the second, and then all of a sudden, if you reconcile these databases, then you have a quota that has been surpassed. So maybe a suggestion is that I think we should look more at giving the farmers back the sovereignty over their data and provide them with systems that are interoperable, meaning that one cooperative or one supplier has one system and it can export the data to all the different partners that it has in a format that is internationally recognized. And I think that will enable cooperatives to maybe collect the same data only once instead of 5 times. And helping the cooperatives with this tool will also make it cheaper for the rest of the industry. So that's a suggestion on that, and I'm curious to have your thoughts on that.
30 seconds.
No, yeah, fully concur. I mean, I think that was the original intent, partly also with the ARS 1000 standard that West Africa is, I think, some sense still developing. Right, that is really the governance gets closer to the farmer in the cooperative's hands. But we've seen when we did a big study with Rabobank Foundation a couple of years ago, where that's just the capability to actually manage that data is just quite immature. So it's like catch-22. Yes, theoretically this is something more ethical and it's more scalable, it has benefits. But then at the same time, actual management of the quality of data, the maintenance of data requires capabilities that are much more present in more the larger trading organizations. So that's the reality we're seeing. Do we see that shift? Yeah, we see that in countries where there's a more sophisticated market structure and more active support also locally. And we see also some governments waking up to say, well, you know, control ownership of the data should be almost of a national concern, and how do we develop that? I think it's natural for, you know, this sort of market in flux that this is where we're at, and these solutions will will start to emerge, either nationally sanctioned or more with cooperatives getting more capabilities. And we also see more downstream solutions that play an aggregative role, such as ICE, which of course plays a unique role in the whole industry, where such aggregation and sort of single source of truth will also emerge. So it's interesting to see how it will develop, but I think it's in the end of the day also, I think many traders are sitting where like it's a suboptimal situation where you're just spending a lot of money and there's a lot of churn in farmers and you have to keep remapping. It's not very sustainable.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question to the entire panel. Sorry, this is Jorge. I am from Cordillera Chocolates from Colombia. And I wanted to ask, okay, we know that the availability of data is no longer the problem. It was back in 2023. But wanted to know if it's still a challenge, since it's a voluntary exercise for the farmer to let all of the system, all of the the procedure do the plotting. Is it still a challenge, and what's the percentage of farmers volunteering to adhere or to add to be incorporated in the traceability Farmforce program and plotting? How many farmers are actually saying no? I'm not interested. I want to keep the traditional way, because sooner than later, traceability is going to be the name of the game. This is going to be the new normal. So at some point, all of the farmers are going to be adhered or added to the program. How many farmers are still saying, you know what? No, I'm not prepared, or no, I'm not interested yet. I would like to know a little bit of scope in that matter.
So perhaps I know who can answer this question very well, and he's not in the panel. His name is Thomas. But before I get there, some of the numbers that you've just talked about around the collecting of data. So here we have farmers. We've seen an uptake in traceability, right? The availability of data has become something that's less of a challenge than it was 3 years ago. Now, towards the consent of data, from the customer data that we receive in discussions with different across Asia, Latin America, and Africa, farmers don't want to be excluded in the market. They want to get paid. But Thomas has a better answer, because he collects data on behalf.
I can just say one thing. Of course, for the farmer, if they have clear benefits, it really helps. So the polygons, we speak a lot about EUDR compliant, which seems very far away from a farmer in the middle of Ivory Coast and Ghana. But again, it's looked like if they are paid for environmental services and get a benefit from agroforestry work that they perform, for sure, then they will engage. If they get agronomical advice, the plots of polygons can also be processed. Remote sensing has really progressed massively over the last 5 years, really. And they get on WhatsApp when to apply compost, or when to go and harvest, when to prune, when to weed, and these are very tangible benefits for the farmers. We should obviously keep in mind this farmer centricity in order to have any of those actions to succeed on the ground.
Okay, Raphael answered you. So, Thomas, you can for next time. Sophonias, we have 2 more questions, so I take them 3 and then we answer them as a batch, as we have 5 minutes to go.
Thank you. My name is Sophonias. I'm from Pula, so a lot of the mapping and problem we talk about you see day to day. But my question is a bit more curiosity. Raphael, you mentioned, for example, the polygon is more sort of voluntary, additional to a GPS point. And I think we tend to sort of villainize, let's say, regulation. But that's a great point around we could do more, and that sort of benefits. Do you guys see other opportunities like that where more can be done? Is maybe sort of a stick, but you can do the polygon version of the GPS, maybe in other regulations as well.
Okay, so that will be answered by Raphael, so keep the answer as you take over.
I can happy to be very quick because... Sorry,
Yeah.
you wanted me to reply?
No, after we take the 3.
Okay, just very quickly, I already mentioned 3 other benefits above EUDR compliance, right? We mentioned agroforestry, we mentioned agronomical advice, crop forecasting for procurement team is also huge. So yeah, I stop there to take more questions.
And these are the benefits that, I'm not trying to sell Farmforce here, but these are the benefits that we see that our customers get from collecting good quality data to a farmer base that they either indirectly or directly source from.
If you allow me to clarify, everything post-data, it's less what are the benefits of Polygon, but do you see other opportunities where you could do the Polygon and not GPS? So maybe we could take that.
For the coffee after.
Yeah.
Good morning, I'm Mens van Wijngaarden, representing Cefitra, Biocor and CPO. We import cocoa, soy, palm into the EU. When you speak about data, what do you mean? Because we see the EDR's 3 pillars, deforestation, traceability and legality. Well, we believe with legality is actually the biggest challenge to comply with the EU. So when you speak about data, what do you mean? And looking at legality in the origin, what do you see the status and the possibilities at the moment? Thank you.
Okay, so this really deserves a longer answer. So we'll take Daniel and then respond to his question and then yes.
One quick thing is visibility increases scrutiny, and that's a thing on the cocoa sector because when you provide your polygon, one of the things UDR is about compliance. And in the cocoa sector, we have a lot of farmers that are informal. They are not formalized, so actually they have certain, they're afraid that when the polygon is up, somebody can say, but you don't have your land title. And in some countries where cocoa is predominant, we know that that can take 10, 15 years because we work in all Latin America. So there is a big fear that with visibility, authority will come after the farmer who has been there, like in Mexico, for 3, 4 generations. Nobody is challenging them, but they don't have the paper. Therefore, in some of these systems, they will appear to be illegal. And so data brings also responsibilities on the midstream and downstream players on supporting farmers on the process to move from informality, which is different to illegality. They are not illegal, they are informal, and help through the national systems to move them to be recognized for what they are doing. I mean, just maybe.
Yeah, that's Daniel from Forest. He gave his answer. Any comments before we answer Menzo's questions?
Quickly, you should have been at the panel yesterday where your neighbor was there. We talked about land data. I mean, it's true. You start to build visibility. It can have unintended consequences in that sense, and that sensitivity is not always visible, or people are not always aware that sit further downstream. So, and you also spoke to that point of legality being the culprit in some sense, right? So, I'd say, and we're talking a lot about input data. So just to sort of clarify, we talk about data, we talk about geolocations with the farmer ID, then we talk about traceability, chain of custody data, second big batch of data, often harder to get, and then the sort of due diligence questionnaires to assess sort of the softer sides of lawful production. So that's the whole data set. I think the focus has been on the study a bit more on that geolocation, but overall, I think this is the necessary data to really have traceability, and so then what you do with it is a deforestation analysis, a legality analysis, and all of that, and you verify it, and then you distribute for different purposes, EUDR being one. But it does indeed come back to legality of saying, like, yeah, once you have visibility on location of production, but once you link that to traceable supply, you start to open up a bit this kind of worms of like who actually owns it, what are the relations and the rights to it, and then you go into a deep rabbit hole in different countries of what that means, because there are sometimes long-standing conflicts in villages. There are migrants that have taken land that have obscure rights. In some sense, it will shine a light on that hidden system and drive more visibility. But many of these things have to be sorted out in the really local context. This is not, I think, the cocoa sector as it goes beyond a single commodity. It goes beyond a single supply chain, and yeah, this is something we need just longer for.
Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. I'm going to open up for closing comments because we're 2 minutes past. So Alejo.
Yeah, the data is complicated. if we have a polygon, we can check deforestation, and if we have a polygon, we could also check protected areas. In Colombia, we have more than 1,600 protected areas, and the number is growing. So we can have an alert in terms of legality. But legality is not only could you grow in a national forest. No, legality is also how you're growing cocoa. We need inspection questionnaires. We need an instrument. We're using a 50-question instrument to answer the reality. But when you talk to a client, the client wants another instrument, so it's tricky, because if we are talking about not only legality, but Region Act. Now, what's Region Act? Is a process, is an outcome, how do I measure? So it's very complicated, the definition, but we're going on.
Thank you, Ali. For closing comments, Rafael?
So first, I think it's just courageous to do this kind of survey and put them out there, because we know how traceability is complex, how hard to collect, and we know big issues of infiltration, right, of illegal deforested cocoa within polygons, and we observe high yields on those. So that's one closing comment. The other one, I come back maybe to Ariana and your comment on who is speaking about this 77% and who you surveyed. And I think it's great we got data also from the producers themselves, who mentioned that they can trace up to 75% of their volume, because we very often hear the downstream players who all say they're almost there, or they're at 80, 90%. So I think it's also great to have the producer's perspective on those numbers.
And my closing comment regarding the data that's being collected. So when we talk about traceability, it's the full chain, not just where the cocoa or where the commodity came from, but it's all the data that surrounds it, right? And this is some of the work that goes on between, I'm seeing some of our customers and partners here. They do those questionnaires, collect that data, and so the thing is, all this data is related back to the farm. Now the challenge comes in when a brand comes with their own requirements, and then another one comes with their own requirements, and then another one comes with their own requirements. So you have like 50, 60 different questionnaires, because you have 60, exactly, 100 for the same farm, right? Because they want it verified and validated, and so the survey has to be geotagged, right? So that's why we have the geotag surveys, so that you can send this data. So while it becomes more and more complicated, it's getting easier because there's more data, which puts us in a good position, because we're looking forward to the next Traceability Barometer. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. The team from Cameroon, thank you very much for coming, the ones who are joining us online, and to all of you for great discussion. And finally to my panel, Alejandro, Rafael, Tomas, it's been a pleasure. Next time we'll find one of the ladies, okay?
We'll give one of our seats away.
Exactly. And last but not least to Mr. Arnaud Dupuis, who really single-handedly ran this Traceability Barometer project since fall last year, and for delivering this beautiful piece of publication. Thank you so much. If you have any more questions, grab a coffee, water, we're still around, and through the day, visit us on our booth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. You spoke really well. Thank you. How are you doing? Where were you? I was looking for you when the seats were empty. Still sleeping.
I can say hi to everyone.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. You always
Farmforce.
Okay, great. Very nice to meet you.
You guys talk.